not expecting Commissioner Bang, right? Oh, there we go. There's Ken. That's it. All right. Looking forward to hearing about his exciting project when it's finally done. All right. Why don't we have everybody, do you need a minute to get settled?
Sorry?
Do you need a minute to get settled?
I'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Go ahead with the roll call.
Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Chomsky,
Present.
Commissioner Javindel,
Present.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Present.
Chair Vihiel McClanahan,
Present.
and Commissioner Pang and Commissioner Von Neidigen are absent.
All right. The land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right. Do we have any public comment on items that are not on the agenda for this evening?
If anyone online would like to address the commission on something not on the agenda, please use the raise your hand function or *9 on your phone. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right, then we can move on to the presentations. Do we have any? Oh, we just police data.
We'll start with the monthly police data on collisions and citations, presenting for the month of June. There were 0 pedestrian-involved collisions. There was 1 bicycle-involved collision. There were 6 vehicle-involved collisions, one of which resulted in an injury. There were 26 moving citations, and there were 0 DUI arrests. This concludes the presentation.
Okay. For the consent calendar this month, the proposed red curb restriction at Washington and Pierce came back with no additional comments from local citizenry. And as such, do we need any, so I guess the question is, do we want to discuss it further, or do anyone online wish to make a comment on it? Otherwise, we'll just move forward with it as a consent calendar item.
For the commission, so for this item 4.2, Commissioner Javindel would need to recuse himself, so that need to be 2 different votes, one for all the other items and then a separate one for 4.2.
All right.
At this point, I'm not seeing any hands raised online from members of the public that want to address the commission on consent calendar items.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and
I'd be happy to move approval of the consent calendar, accepting item 4.2 to be voted upon separately. I'll second.
roll call.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindel,
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Aye.
Chair Vihiel McClanahan.
Aye.
The items 4.1, 4.3, and 4.4 are approved.
Do you have a motion to?
Do do you need to leave the room or just
As
not
long as you don't
vote?
discuss it, I can see.
Yeah, as long as we're.
Okay. I'll move to approve item 4.2.
I'll second.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Yes.
Chair Vihil McClanahan.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right. And now we will move on to 5.1. You have a presentation for this?
Give me 1 second to pull it up. Okay, item 5.1, we'll be discussing the City of Albany's traffic calming program. And yeah, where we are and where we're going with it. So just a little bit of background, as we've gone through before in the last commission meeting and a couple months prior. It's a 7-step process to get a project in the queue for implementation for traffic calming. It begins with a resident request. The staff does a street segment evaluation to determine feasibility, and then a traffic study is conducted, traffic survey. And as we, the policy was updated in 2021 and shifted from a speed and volume criteria where streets were eligible for speed treatments if the speed limit, the 85th percentile speed limit was over 5 miles per hour, to speeding vehicle volume criteria where blocks were prioritized based on how many vehicles were speeding a day. So looking back at the projects that have been requested by residents and evaluated as part of a speed survey, there are 8 blocks that have been approved for traffic calming and are currently in the queue. These are those 8 blocks. You'll notice in bold, we listed a block that was requested since the last traffic calming count was brought to the commission. I think, so these are, the bolded blocks are since 2022. And these 8 blocks have been recommended for traffic calming and are in the queue for funding and implementation. There are 30 blocks that were surveyed and are not yet in the queue. Again, the bolded blocks are blocks that were surveyed between the last time counts were conducted in 2022 and today. And so I believe there are 14 of those. And you'll see here that there is the top block that's not in the queue, 500 Pierce, is ineligible for traffic calming because it is on a bus route. Number 3 and number 5, 900 and 800 Jackson, are under consideration for traffic calming measures as part of Kains Adams project route connections. And then the rest of the blocks are still under consideration and are not yet in the queue for traffic calming measures. I should note that the second block with the highest number of vehicles traveling over the speed limit is 950 Peralta. Every other street or block, on this list has a speed limit of 25 miles per hour. This particular block has a speed limit of 15 miles per hour. And so this number, the 1,983, reflects the number of vehicles traveling above the speed limit of 15 miles per hour. It's actually 16 miles per hour because we couldn't break it down. So slightly more. It's probably around 2,050 vehicles traveling above the speed limit daily. But importantly, there's only 286 vehicles traveling above 25 miles per hour. But technically, because this block is at 15 mile per hour speed limit, it shows a significantly higher number of vehicles speeding. This is just the rest of the list, so you'll notice that, vehicle speeds, or number of vehicles speeding goes down precipitously as you go down the list. And again, the bolded blocks are those that have been surveyed in the last couple of years. So the top three blocks that have been that rose to the top in terms of number of vehicles going above the speed limit on a daily basis are 900 Peralta between Marin and Sonoma, 600 Key Route between Thousand Oaks and Portland, and 900 Ramona between Solano and Marin. So these three are all have over 200 vehicles a day going over the speed limit. The rest are below that 200 vehicle a day threshold. So looking at them on a map, this is the equivalent property damage only score map from the local road safety plan from last year, or the LRSP as we're calling it. And those three block segments are highlighted with the red rectangles right now. You'll notice 2 out of 3 of them are not on blocks with any sort of score on the EPDO. And the EPDO is a method that assigns a crash cost and score to each collision according to the severity of the crash. High injury network just looks at the number of injuries flat out on each block and intersection. And you'll notice that all 3 of those are not on blocks that are part of the high injury network. So those are the 3 that rose to the top. In the analysis, none of them are significantly more dangerous than other blocks around them, but they do have higher vehicle speeds. So the recommendation from staff, just kind of a little bit of a background on this recommendation, is that we have to make difficult choices about traffic calming projects due to our limited funds as a city. We are looking to incorporate traffic calming measures on additional high-speed blocks into as part of the Kains Adams Bikeway project, as I noted before. If you take all of those, the blocks in the queue into account and those additional blocks as part of the Kains Adams Bikeway project, 77 eligible blocks with speeds over 200 vehicles a day are already in the queue for traffic calming. And because staff is moving projects forward on higher risk blocks and does not have additional funding set aside for new traffic calming projects, staff recommends that that the Transportation Commission only move forward with 1 additional traffic calming project at this time. And that project is the 950 block of Peralta, based on the sheer number of vehicles going over the speed limit every day. As we mentioned, over 2,000 vehicles going above the speed limit every day. That said, the 950 block of Peralta has a street slope in excess of 8%, so it's not recommended for speed humps or tables. So we're recommending that additional analysis be conducted to determine the specific types of traffic calming measures suitable for this block before moving forward with any specific plans. And that is the staff recommendation and the presentation.
Thank you. Do any-
Mr. Chair, I think I need to recuse myself because of the block between Solano and Marin. I didn't catch which one that was. You go back to the slide with the red squares.
Yes, give me 1 second.
There it is, number 13. Yeah, so I live just north of the blue squiggle between numbers 4 and 7.
Yeah, that's probably within 1,000 feet.
And the squiggle is not involved, but I know that the corner of the block that includes Safeway to the right of that is within my bounds, so it's questionable. I'm sorry, I didn't realize this before.
You're that 800 block of Santa Fe?
Yep. About the center.
And the proposals for the 900 block of Ramona, is that correct? You would be more than 500 feet away from that.
Thank you.
I did notice, just as an aside, on the first chart, this was going to be a question, I'm sorry, but pertinent to Ken's comments, the whole corridor of Santa Fe from Marin to the north is included here, except the 800 block of Santa Fe.
The blocks on either side of me are listed in the table, but we're not addressing them tonight.
Right.
We're only talking about the priority 3, I suppose. Okay. Any other questions? It's just a clarifying question for my own historical information. Why are there only speed tables on the southbound block of 600 Key Route? It may be that no one here knows, but it was part of the complaint in the.
I'll,
Reed or I or Jeff?
yeah, we'll defer to the commissioners that have the institutional knowledge.
Sure, I'll take a shot. When the high school was reconstructed, we had two-way traffic on that side of Key Route, and those were put in at the time. The other half of Key Route was part of the construction zone, so nothing was done there. So these are just left over from that construction project.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, we can move to public comment on this issue.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Teresa Rumjohn. I live at 980 Peralta Avenue at the top of the hill in that, I guess, remaining block number 2 that you want to add to the study. I just want to thank you for considering that, and I really hope that we go through and look at traffic measures for there. I've lived there since 1983, and I've seen all kinds of accidents. And earlier this year, 2 vans came up and one of them flipped over. It's the top of the hill is on a blind curve, and that's why there's a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit. And backing out, people just the way it is, people coming up and on either side of the hill, because I live at the top, they don't see me. So I have to back out really slowly, and across the street, my neighbors are the same. So, and in the past, the cars, people miss the curve, and they try to rectify, and they've hit all the cars on both sides of the street. So that's the way it is. Okay, thank you.
Hello. I also live on the same block, and the blind hill is a serious deal, and that's why it's 15 miles an hour. I understand that 8% grade, we're not allowed to put speed humps on, but I do know that, I believe it's Washington Avenue by the hill, they did put a speed table at the top of the hump, the top of the hill. I just wanted to say, 90% of the car speed according to the data, which is pretty significant, and it is super dangerous. As a cyclist, people can't see me. People try to go around me, and then cars are coming the opposite direction on a blind curve, or blind hill. I would love to talk more, whoever I can, about anything other than more than just soft techniques to slow down the traffic, because it is a real problem. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Hillary Sardina, so sorry I missed the presentation, but I am at 974 Peralta Avenue. My husband's family has been there for 50 years, so they've kind of seen this issue be ignored for a long time, or things like striping and soft measures be tried without success. I mean, recently when there was the center stripe and then the side stripes, I feel like that's caused more accidents. I've only been there for about a decade, but the car that flipped over was right in front of my house and was really terrifying for my children. And in general, more and more families have been moving to this block, and it's kind of scary. Like, even we do National Night Out, and it's kind of wide at the base because it goes on to Marin, and we only get 2 barriers, and people try and go around them. We're a thoroughfare between Gilman and Marin, right? Like, people kind of go through on their way to other places, not thinking about the fact that there's a lot of families, cyclists, right? That's another thing that Eric brought up, that is we often, even though it's supposed to be a shared lane, people don't want to share it. And so that makes it hard because there isn't a space for a bike lane. So I just urge you guys, first, thank you for looking at this. We've been trying to get it in front of you for a long time, but just how creative can we be? Because it is every time I back out of my driveway, I'm scared, right? And so I think this is our chance to try and do something to try and make it a safer space for the kids, for all of the motorists that use it. So thank you so much for considering the issue, and I really look forward to what you come up with.
Thank you. Doesn't look like we have anybody else in the room. It looks like there are some hands up online.
Yes. Kim Trutain, please go ahead.
Hi, I am speaking as a representative of Albany Unified School District, and we were also happy to see the traffic calming data that came through, and are looking forward to what could be done on Jackson Street in the area near Ocean View Elementary. And I just wanted to emphasize what I wrote in our comment to the commission, which is, with the amount of traffic on Key Route adjacent to the high school and with the amount of pedestrians there, we would really like to see some sort of plan go forward where we could get some traffic calming, because it's all of our children there in high school, and it is much needed in that block. Thank you.
Next, Clay Larson, please go ahead.
Actually, I'm not interested in talking about this item.
Sorry.
That's all.
I unmuted now?
I'm sorry, Clay. Did I understand you say you're not interested in this item?
No, but then you're a little trick on a little fast on the trigger. I wanted to comment actually on item 4-4, and I assumed I had missed it. But in looking at the YouTube video, it's pretty clear to me that the chair never asked for comments. I know, Jeff, I know you made a casual comment about there weren't any hands raised, but you never asked for hands raised. So I think the appropriate remediation here is to reopen that item, ask for comment, and then vote on it again. Is this mic working?
Chair, I'd recommend that we accommodate Mr. Larson's request, but finish this agenda item and come back to that, just so we
Sure.
get it.
Yeah, that seems fine. Let's see. All right, so I guess if there are no further hands raised, we can go on to,
I will note you did receive an email correspondence on this agenda item too, regarding the traffic calming, just for the record.
oh, yeah. Yes, we did. And the both of the email correspondence have also made either online or in-person comments as well. So is there any discussion?
So just wanted to comment that even if we use the 25-mile-an-hour cutoff for Peralta, it'd be in the top 3 just based on the vehicles going over 25. So if anyone's concerned about the different speed limit, it ultimately didn't make a difference in terms of making the top 3. And the other, doesn't seem to be any concern expressed tonight on the remaining projects, but of course they stay eligible for funding in future rounds. So it's just, what are we working on first? I do think the comment about, similar to Washington, could we put a speed table or some vertical deflection at the crest of the hill is worth looking at based on whatever feedback we've gotten from Washington Avenue.
Was that Catherine's Walk?
I don't know. I wasn't involved in that one. Too close to my house.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think so.
Do we have any idea, do we have any ideas of what other options there are? We make it one way uphill? Do we have any
One way uphill in both directions.
Well, I wonder if we have any directionality.
Except for residents.
If we have any
Everyone else has to
directionality
stay at
data
the top
on
of the hill.
speeding in the speed study. It's we've received a number of comments over my tenure here about this block every time traffic calming comes up. It sounds to me like the big problem is the downhill direction, people just coming over the hill at 25 and around the corner and then potentially speeding up more as they go down the hill. But I don't know what that would do to the traffic flow in the area. It's I'm wondering what, what are the next steps here? Or is that, is that what would be studied, I guess? But,
If the commission or the public has suggestions of traffic calming ideas for this block, then it's something that obviously we would entertain. For the next steps for city staff is to work with a consultant to come up with some design options that we would bring back to you at a future date.
So one of the suggestions I think we received by email was some kind of physical center barrier to prevent cars from passing in the opposite lane when there's no visibility. Would that be included in the study? Okay. So it's not really our mission tonight to talk about all those options and decide which ones we support. It's just to decide if that block is one that we want to pursue. And likewise, the other 2 blocks we want to pursue.
All right. So in terms of the staff recommendation, it's to proceed to evaluation of potential non-speed hump traffic calming measures. And I think the only modification I would suggest to that is to not necessarily exclude speed hump at the top of the hill, but to not do them on the slope. Otherwise, having the consultant look at the full range of measures makes sense.
anybody have any commentary on why if we would want to move any of the priorities around? Is there particular concerns about these other blocks?
I went into this having quite strong concerns. I wasn't on the commission when the policy was established about the 25-mile-an-hour cutoff. And I was really concerned that that was going to cause problems because in my experience of driving in 25-mile-an-hour zones, most people go 26, 27, 28 miles an hour, and that's considered normal. And it seemed like the criterion of measuring the number of cars over 25 ran the risk of taking every kind of collector and arterial street in Albany and trying to slow it down below 25, which I wasn't really sure if that was practical because that's not the way 25-mile-an-hour speed limits work in this country, for better or for worse. So I was concerned that what that policy would do was not really measure the amount of speeding on a street, but just measure the amount of traffic. That basically all traffic is a couple miles over the speed limit, and that by using that criterion, we were just focusing all our attention on arterial streets and ignoring quieter residential streets altogether. But looking at this data was really interesting to me, and I think I'm no longer worried about that because when I see this data, it seems very clear that there's just a few problem blocks, and there's a lot of places where even with that strict cutoff of 25, most people seem to be going below that on many, like even all the blocks that haven't risen to the top. We actually don't have quite as much a habit of driving 27, 28 in the 25 zone in Albany as I thought we did, and I'm happy about that. And it really does seem like the outliers that we see in this chart are pretty extreme outliers, and I guess I'm going to withdraw my concern about the 25 cutoff and say I think this criterion is working based on the data I see here.
I'm in favor of including consideration of a top-of-hill speed hump, some kind of center delineator that is three-dimensional. Perhaps this is a 15-mile-an-hour street that is off of Marin and is signalized, so it may give the appearance of being a more major street than we really intend it to be. Is there any kind of treatment that we don't use elsewhere in Albany that could help drive that home? Something that once you drive onto the street, it's different. And the first thing that comes to mind is dots, but that may not be appropriate on a slope. But that kind of thing where you enter the street, it's different. You look up, there's a sign telling you it's 15 miles an hour, and that you better watch out for the speed hump. Just to create a different environment.
Pave it with bricks.
To the school district. Sorry?
Pave it with bricks.
Yeah, if you had a lot of money, you could pave it in cement and put grooves in it. But yeah. But you understand the effect that I'm looking for there. But to respond to the letter from the school district, the 600 block of Key Route is involved in another project that we've taken a preliminary look at on this commission in order to provide space on street for cyclists in the Key Route corridor and to actually provide more space for students, potentially with a protected bikeway in front of the school in the 600 block. So we should keep in mind the asymmetry of the speed humps at that point, but I think that's the proper time to look at that block.
Sorry, I'm looking at the at Peralta. Is it a standard 40? There's like the area 40-foot wide right away. No.
That's a question I don't have the answer to offhand.
It looks about the same. It's hard to tell.
we ready for a motion? Why don't you explain that to the gentleman?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. We're past that point, but feel free to email the Transportation Commission any further suggestions or comments that you might have. I think if no one has any feelings about reordering these, then I think that we're probably ready for a motion.
I would move that we approve the updated prioritization list and that we ask staff to proceed with evaluation of potential traffic calming on the 950 block of Peralta between Marin and Sonoma, including potential, among other things, for a speed hump or speed table at the top where it's flat.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javandel,
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Yes.
Chair Vihil McClanahan.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay.
There was one member of the public who walked in late and might have been here for this item.
No, I was just here, I need to tell my husband something urgent.
I'll step out while you re-vote on the consent calendar.
So Mr. Larson has encouraged us to pull out and rediscuss 4.4. Could either of you give us when Commissioner Javandel returns, could either of you give us a brief rundown of what the Complete Streets checklist comprises? Just for the record.
So isn't it possible to take public comment without a presentation on the item and then decide if we want to enter into the item and take a presentation?
Is that the commission discretion, how you want to manage this?
I mean, I guess my feeling is my understanding of the Complete Streets checklist was that it was like basically a procedural item. I'm unsure what to.
How about this? How about if we listen to the public comment
Okay.
and then decide if we want to reopen the item?
Okay.
Which is the usual way you would do it for the consent calendar.
Okay. Should we do that? Should we wait for Commissioner Javandel? Or I don't know how long.
You have a quorum.
You do have quorum.
Yeah, he asked us to go ahead.
Okay.
We now have two hands raised. This is item 4-4, the Complete Streets checklist for the Kains Abs project. Clay Larson, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for taking this out of order or for accommodating the request. As I said, I want to talk about item 4-4, which was the Complete Street checklist. Now, item 5 under the checklist, and I'm a little surprised that the commission hasn't taken time to look at the material provided with the meeting and know what the checklist is. But under item 5, staff claimed that the MUTCD, that stands for Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the US DOT publication. The standards here were applied and will be used for the detailed design of the Kains Adams bikeways, reading from the report. This does not appear to be an accurate statement since the MUTCD standard for contraflow or counterflow bikeways provides the guidance that counterflow bicycle lanes should not be used between a general purpose lane and on-street parallel parking for motor vehicles. That's section 9E.08 of the manual if you want to take a look. But this of course describes exactly the proposed installations on Kains and Adams. Now the manual defines guidance as a statement of recommended practice in typical situations with deviations allowed only if engineering judgment or an engineering study indicates that the deviation is appropriate. The only applicable engineering study that I'm aware of is the 2017 study by Parisi Transportation, which found the contraflow bike lanes on Kains and Adams were not safe because of the narrow, quoting from the report, the narrow streets, the many intersecting driveways, and the poor visibility. So I think if the city wants to complete the checklist accurately and honestly, it should include a discussion of these issues in completing its response to this item 5 on the checklist. All right, thank you. And again, I appreciate you accommodating me.
Next speaker on this item is Amy Smollins. Please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks for opening this up, and I appreciate Clay reopening this. Thanks, Clay. Item 4, transit coordination, states that there's no public transit facility in the project area, but actually there's an AC Transit bus stop just below Kains Avenue on Solano that accommodates the 18 and the G. It's the first stop after San Pablo Avenue, and there's an AC Transit parklet there. So it's really pretty busy for people waiting for the bus there and getting off from San Francisco. And then on the other side of the street, there's a bus stop for people getting off the 18 and going into the city on the Transbay bus in the morning. So I'm not sure exactly what you would have to speak to AC Transit with, but there are bus stops in the immediate area. So I hope you take those into account, whatever you're doing here. And also please prioritize daylighting Kains and Adam intersection, and because the visibility is still pretty poor for drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians as we try to cross. So please prioritize that in line with the new law. Thank you very much.
We have one more public speaker. Brian Martin, please go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to thank the commission for taking a look at this item. I live on Adams Street on the 600 block, and I'm hoping that we are able to get the grant that will help move this forward. I did want to mention that the Parisi report that was mentioned by a previous speaker, it listed a number of configurations that it didn't recommend. But the contraflow bike lane was one of 2 that it did recommend the city to consider. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the city flesh out the details of that. I also wanted to mention that something I emailed the city a month or 2 ago was that the city of Montreal has adopted this contraflow configuration for, it's already 1 block, but they're extending it to 14 blocks of consecutive blocks of one-way traffic and a contraflow bike lane. Their street's 35 feet wide. I measured it while I was there in June. And ours is 30 feet wide, like most streets in Albany. Adams and Kains are 30 feet wide, like most streets in Albany that already have 2-way bicycle and car traffic on them. And and I did notice that there were some bikes riding side by side in Montreal on that block that's already configured with a contraflow bike lane. But the Parisi report said that due to the narrower street, there would not be a possibility of side-by-side bicycle riding, so that would be one limitation. But yeah, it should be fine, I would think, with 1 bicycle without side-by-side riding on Adams and Kains with our slightly narrower streets. And I thank you for taking this up. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
No further hands are raised.
Thanks. Is there any feeling about a need for further discussion?
The purpose of this document is to strengthen our grant application, right?
My understanding is it's a requirement for any project that is getting grant funding from the regional body.
So in your professional opinion, do the issues brought up by the public raise any concerns about whether this document is suitable for its purpose? Or?
The checklist is primarily to ensure that bicycles and pedestrians and transit are being considered in any project, street redesign project. That said, there is public comment that could be warranted, could warrant a review of the checklist to ensure that all modes are being properly accommodated and that the checklist is in line with the design being proposed for the streets. So what staff can do is review the checklist and make accommodations based on public comment that we heard tonight.
Shouldn't we then bring it back, at least as a consent item at the next meeting?
I'd be comfortable if you would like to defer that to us, but of course, that's your discretion if you'd like to see it one more time. I don't know what the deadline is for submitting this offhand.
Which grant is it?
We have a Kains and Adams grant that
We already have it.
we've submitted, and then the other project is the Pierce
Yeah.
Street Bikeway.
I was thinking if it was the Safe Streets for All that's due August 29th, that would be something to consider. But I agree with, what staff has said, that the checklist is to make sure we've considered all modes of transportation. And I feel we have. Whether there's agreement on the conclusions is, I don't think I've ever seen a project that had absolute agreement on all the conclusions. So I don't think that some differences of opinion merit revisiting the complete streets checklist necessarily in this case. I'm comfortable with it as is for the purpose that it has. And I do think that, as was mentioned, that the consultant who made the proposals, why they identified pros and cons of different alternatives, these are the alternatives they recommended. And the standards are good to have, and they apply in many cases. They don't have to apply in all cases, and there's a reason that there's opportunity to deviate from them with good engineering basis. And I think that that is what the designer has taken into consideration. So I don't share any great concern over it. So I'm fine with it just being approved as it is.
I agree with the commissioner, and I trust that staff has interpreted the NACDO guidelines appropriately. Also, specifically on the Parisi report, I was on the commission at that time, and as Mr. Martin states, there were several options that were not adopted. They were not ruled out.
I have no objections to the content. I'm just sort of putting on my city attorney's hat, however poorly I can do that. I just want to make sure that procedurally we're okay.
What you're doing tonight is the procedural step that's required is that we're supposed to present it to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Group, which is one of your functions. So the procedural step is checked.
So I,
And together public input, so we've got that as well. So I think we're in a good place. But of course, again, if the commission wants one more shot at it, we can, assuming there's no deadline issues that we're not aware of it off the top of our heads.
If it were a project we'd never seen before, I might be more inclined to bring it back, but we've discussed it extensively. So I don't feel like we're likely to see anything that changes our view substantially on it.
And editing this document is not about changing our plans for the project. It's just about making sure the document is accurate and fulfills its purpose. And I think we, at least several of us, agree that it is appropriate for its purpose.
I move that we do not reconsider this item on the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Go for a roll call. Commissioner Barnes,
aye.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javendel,
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey,
Yes.
Chair Vigil McClanahan.
Aye.
So moved.
So, out of the way. Let's move on to item 5.2.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Lamb. I'm Associate Engineer with City of Albany Public Works. And tonight I'll be presenting an update on our pavement condition assessment, as well as progress in our paving program. So starting off with a system overview, the City of Albany's road network consists of approximately 32 centerline miles and 62 and a half lane miles, 5.27 million square feet. And of that, as split out by functional class, we are looking at roughly 21% arterials, a quarter collectors. A third of those are residential streets, and then the City of Albany designated a fourth functional class, the other class, that consists of mostly residential streets that have been placed, that have a specific priority placed on it. Typically, it consists of residential streets that, for example, have a bicycle network. The other class also represents the City of Albany's off-street bicycle paths, for example, the Greenway and the Buchanan Bikeway. So here's a timeline of where we are, spanning from the last pavement condition assessment. PTAP stands for the Pavement Technical Assistance Program, which is put on by the Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, just getting a couple of acronyms out of the way. But looking at this timeline, the last pavement condition assessment, we call it round 22, was performed in August of 2021, about 3.5 years ago. The results of that were issued in a report in March 2022, which was then presented here at Transportation Commission in May of 22. The current round, round 24, the pavement condition assessment was performed in December of last year, and that report was issued early in 2024. And so across the bottom, I've identified some of our major paving projects that have occurred, just to give a sense of the timeline of when these pavement assessments have occurred and what's included in the two different rounds, the previous round and the current round.
Excuse me. So just to make sure I understand, if we could go back a sec, the 24 survey went into the 23 pavement management construction?
So the what MTC designates as the round 22 PTAP assessment, the actual assessment, the field work and data collection was conducted in August of 2021. That was the previous round.
So if we change the bottom right box to say round 22, that would be accurate?
The bottom right box, this one? So round 24 is the current round, and that report was issued in April of 2024. And the field work done for round 24 was, the data was collected in December of 2023. Across the bottom, we're showing the pavement construction projects. So unfortunately, there's a lot of overlapping terms like pavement, maintenance, and construction. But what's shown in the bottom right box that was constructed in April 2024 was our slurry seal project.
So which survey went into that?
So the current report, round 24, the survey was done
No.
in,
Which survey went into the work that was done in the 2023 maintenance construction slurry construction?
that was planned using information from the round 22 survey.
Okay. Can you see why I'm confused?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a quick overview. I mean, MTC assigns a pavement consultant that conducts these assessments, and they assess the street condition and provide recommendations for pavement maintenance and pavement program planning. So differences from the previous round to the current round, we have changed pavement consultants, and with this new pavement consultant comes a slightly different methodology that I'll provide some information on. We've also updated our roadway inventory, and we've introduced some different budget scenarios as part of the effort. So starting with the new pavement consultant, you may recall the previous round we used pavement engineering, and they were with us for the round before that as well. This year, this round 24, MTC assigned Adhara Systems as our consultant. And Adhara Systems, they use a different means of data collection that allows them to sample at a higher rate. So what we're seeing on the slide is a comparison of the different ways that the consultants can collect the data on the pavement distresses. On the left, we see Adhara's system for data collection, and on the right, we see what we call the standard methodology, which is a 10% manual sample. So typically, a pavement consultant will have their inspector go out in the field and identify a segment, typically about 10% of a roadway segment, that is representative of the distresses that are found over the entire length of that segment. And so when they limit themselves to that segment, they may show that they're missing some distresses that are found down the length of the road that was not surveyed, and it's up to the individual inspector's professional judgment in identifying which segments are representative of the segment as a whole. Adhara, they approach the data collection differently in that they mount a camera onto a vehicle, and they will drive down the roadway and collect data over the entire length of that roadway segment. And so Adhara's data collection, they claim their camera-mounted vehicle is able to collect a minimum of 30% of the roadway's distresses in comparison to the manual method's 10%. So they're able to collect more data, which they say is able to be more representative and reduce the kind of individual judgment of that inspector. The
Adhara drives down the street with a camera.
Can you ask into the mic?
Adhara drives down the street with a camera, and then someone just looks at it visually. There's no motion detection sensors or anything like that.
No, there's no specific technology that I'm aware of. What Adhara does is they collect the data, and they do have some technology that identifies and processes the camera images that are captured. And then there is still a pavement inspector that goes through the images and we'll call it post-processing, the manner in which the pavement distresses are identified and calculated is still the same between ADHARA and the manual methodology. That MTC has a standard for which they identify the type of pavement distress as well as the severity of it, and both ADHARA's methodology and the standard methodology apply that same standard.
Sorry, tiny aside. An alligator crack is basically where there are like bunches of loose chunks of asphalt that are still contained in their original footprint.
Yes, that's cracking that's close together and resembles the skin of an alligator.
Right, okay. Sorry.
Sure. And I'll point out that, again, both methodologies, the inspectors do undergo the same training provided by MTC and the same certification process. The inventory updates, we went through our roadway network database and Street Saver, and the changes fell into a handful of categories, but typically what we did is we wanted to match the functional classes identified in our roadway network to the Albany City General Plan, the Active Transportation Plan, and also identified bike networks. And the other discrepancy that we found was some segments that were identified in a staff memo provided to the Transportation Commission back in May of 2019 noted some changes to functional class that were not implemented, and so that was corrected as part of the inventory updates for this round. And there was one roadway segment, Jackson Street, that was outside of City of Albany's jurisdiction, and so that's been removed. So this table shows the resulting pavement condition index, PCI, by the different functional classes. But the citywide average PCI score is a 58. And again, sorted out by functional class, the arterials are slightly lower at 56, collectors at 57, residential, again, close to the citywide average at 57, but our other category is higher by 6 points at a 64. And this slide shows a comparison between the current round scores and the prior round. And what we're seeing here is across the board, maybe with the exception of collectors functional class, we're seeing a small increase in our functional class, in our PCI by functional class. So I have a slide here showing our city network and a lot of individual segment scores. And the focus is really on the scores assigned to each segment, but I thought that splitting this out, we can kind of see our very good streets are shown in green, and across the spectrum, on the other side, we have streets that are in very poor condition shown in red and poor condition shown in orange. But again, this isn't really looking at the individual scores, but how this stacks up collectively and where we, the distribution of where we have poor pavement. The next couple of slides further breaks that down by functional class. So again, starting off with our arterials, we see that our arterial score PCI of 56 is close to the citywide average of 58, but there are a number of specific segments that are bringing that score down, namely on Cleveland and the Cleveland connection with Buchanan and East Shore. And we also have pretty low pavement condition on Solano, east of Masonic. Moving ahead, for our collectors, again, it's close to the citywide average, but we see a number of streets that are contributing to a lower score, namely Solano by the Hill, Key Route in Brighton. Next, we have residentials. Again, a PCI for residentials close to the citywide average. One note that Commissioner McCroskey brought up is the condition assessment that was performed, it unfortunately does not include the slurry seal project that was constructed in April of 2024. And so there are a number of streets, mostly in the residentials and the other category that we see in the next slide, where we did apply some pavement maintenance treatment, but it's not captured in these PCI scores. So we'll see when we get to talking about the work that was done, the distribution of the slurry seal project. There was a lot of work that was done concentrated in the Albany Hill area, where we applied a new slurry coating, but also, the project did have citywide coverage, and it's not captured. So finally, these are the other categories, and there are a number of streets identified here. Did want to show a comparison for how Albany is doing compared to other cities regionally. In the interest of time and presentation, I limited this to Alameda County cities. One note here is for this data, which was provided by MTC, the most up-to-date data that's available only goes up to 2022. I did reach out to MTC, and they informed me that the data from the current round 24, isn't available yet publicly. So this isn't a fully apples-to-apples comparison. But we do see Albany is around 57, 56, and the current round score of 58 marginally moves the needle, but it does show that we are improving, especially in consideration of, this score doesn't account for an additional large treatment project that we have constructed. Countywide, the PCI average as of 2022 was 67, and regionally in the Bay Area, another 67 score. And one of the things I'm seeing here is, with pavement maintenance, it is tricky to try to select projects and improve your score in such a way while your roadway segments that are not selected for any improvements do continue to deteriorate. And so it's a matter of trying to keep your streets that are good in good condition while with the available resources that you have. And again, for Albany, we are seeing a turnaround in our pavement condition across the city, that we are starting to see improvements over time in comparison to the last few years. And the other thing that I noted here is the data that's published by MTC that's available. These are rolling 3-year averages. And so, again, this is not an apples-to-apples comparison, unfortunately, but it is just an indicator to see how we're doing and where we're going with the inclusion of this score for our data that's available. So one of the outputs for this effort is Street Saver, which is the software from MTC that is, it is a database for our roadway network, including current and past PCI scores. One thing that it produces is it can produce a forecast given certain budget sizes that Street Saver does select roadway treatment projects based off of the available budget within its algorithm. And so the takeaway here is with our current budget, we're looking at the blue line now. We're seeing that we can hold our network PCI steady and maybe a slight decline, which is consistent with a comparison of the scenario shown in the yellow line, which is in order to maintain our current PCI at what it is, what it currently is, how much budget is needed to maintain the PCI at its current condition. The data here is a little bit strange because it's skewed by the slurry seal treatment project that we had planned, and so Street Saver did select those as projects to implement for the first year, and that's the explanation for why the blue line with our current planned maintenance has such a high starting PCI score. So it starts off in the first year of the projection at a score of 63, even though the report says that our current PCI is 58. And so, and speaking with our...
Finish your thought, please.
Sure. To try to address some of that skew, we did ask the consultant to rerun the same scenario with our current budget, but excluding the planned slurry seal project streets, and allow Street Saver to select its own streets based on its algorithm to see what it would look like if Street Saver selected the streets based off of the proposed budget that we had. And so that budget scenario is shown in the red line. And the other two scenarios, I think in the past round, we've had the consultant look at what would be the budget needed to raise PCI by 5 points. And again, with the slurry seal project kind of skewing the budget scenarios, increasing PCI by 5 points from 58 would have placed us at a score of 63, which we were somewhat on track for. And so we changed the PCI score increase scenarios to try to hit 65 and 68. And those are the lines shown in green and purple. Was there still a question after?
More of them, actually.
Sure.
Let me see if I can be brief. So you're telling us that some of these lines involve the slurry seal streets and some of them don't?
Correct. The current budget projection shown in red was a projection with the current budget that deliberately left off the slurry seal streets. And then the line shown in yellow for maintaining our PCI. In order to do that, Street Saver does not account for the planned projects. It just shows, it selects based on its own algorithm what segments would maintain that PCI over that period. And so you can see that the line is flat because if you want to maintain a PCI of 58 and your starting point is 58, then it will only select streets to try to maintain it over the course of that 5 years.
Yes. What was the project cost for the slurry sealing? Approximately.
If I recall, it's approximately 1.2 million, and that includes a lot of that was restriping.
Let's just leave it at that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. So we've talked about how we're looking at this data, but I'll take a step back and talk a little bit about pavement preservation strategies that we're using. And to do that, I'm borrowing a slide from Joe Reary of Pavement Engineering that he used to present to Commission in 2022. But what we're seeing here is a typical pavement deterioration curve. And it illustrates that there are certain critical points along the lifetime of a pavement where we try to tackle and we try to implement our pavement treatment strategies. And one of the critical points is you can see there's an inflection point where the pavement condition starts dropping more steeply within the first 10 years, let's say, of that pavement's life, as shown in the curve. And that is that's where we typically try to tackle these streets with preventive treatments like our seals that provide it with a better weathering surface. But once the street enters into decline in that steep portion of the curve, and it starts steadying out and not deteriorating as quickly, then regardless of whether you're waiting 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, the street condition itself isn't going to decline as quickly. And the other consideration is then you're looking at much more expensive treatments. So the strategy generally is to try to keep your good streets good, that is, use those preventive maintenance treatments when your streets are still in good condition before the steeper drops in this curve. And then tackle streets with much more costly strategies like reconstruction. And those are typically the streets that are in poor and very poor condition. We'll take on those streets as budget and resources allow. And so how this ends up playing out is, if we follow this strategy, you'll see streets that are in the very good condition, the number of streets in very good condition and very poor condition increase, while the number of streets that are in good and poor condition overall tend to decrease. And the reason for that is your streets that are in very good and good condition, you'll tackle with these maintenance strategies that bring them up to very good. Either they'll stay in, they're very good and they'll stay in very good condition, or they're in good condition and they'll improve to very good. Whereas your streets that are in poor condition, they will continue to deteriorate because you're looking at more expensive treatment strategies where you'll only be able to tackle a limited number of streets. And so what we're seeing here is the frequency of these streets as split up by their condition category, very good to very poor. And then I added a small trend line. I added it in the divide between the good and poor. But we're seeing that we are starting to improve in the number of streets that are in good and very good condition, while streets that are in poor condition are continuing to deteriorate. We are doing construction to bring streets in poor and very poor condition up to the very good category, but again, the number of streets that we're able to tackle at any given time is limited. So from here, I'll be shifting focus to looking backwards in our paving timeline to see the streets where we've had construction since the last round of PTAP assessment. And compared to the prior timeline that was shown, I did add another year to it because we had Washington Avenue Reconstruction Project, RIA project. It did span 2021 and 2022. So we had Washington Avenue, Adams Street, 2022 pavement rehabilitation, which was 6 different north-south running, typically residential streets. Marin Avenue, Phase 1, which was from Cornell Avenue to Key Route, and then our slurry seal project. And I wanted to show these on a map just to show the spread of our pavement projects since the last time that we spoke. So starting in with 2022, these are the pavement projects that were completed in that time frame. So showing the block of Adams Street and then Washington Avenue from San Pablo out to Pomona. This is what it typically looks like in a photo of the after the construction. So from 2022 on to 2023, by 2023 we've added a number of streets. We have the 2022 pavement rehabilitation project shown in purple, showing Jackson, Kains, Cornell, Evelyn, Masonic, and Carmel. And then we also paved Marin Avenue Phase 1, and as part of that, we also paved Masonic Avenue from Marin to Solano. That's shown in the green. So here are some photos from the 2022 paving at Kains and Masonic, and then some additional paving and from the Marin project. So then the jump from 2023 to 2024, we add in a large number of streets. The slurry seal project tackled 7 center line miles of streets around the city. So this is the distribution of the streets that received the slurry treatment, shown in gray. And one of the things I wanted to show was, well, here's a before and after shot of our speed table at Catherine's Walk. But I did want to show those streets that were in red and orange and yellow, especially on the hill before, were, did see some improvements from the recent project that wasn't captured in the latest assessment. And again, that's further demonstrated by the big jump in PCI shown in those budget scenarios. So we do have a number of streets, again, that are still in poor and very poor categories. And looking ahead, we have two projects that are out on the horizon. That is Marin Phase 2, so the extension of the Marin project from Key Route Boulevard out to the city border with Berkeley at Tulare, as well as the Cleveland Avenue rehab project, which spans from Cleveland Avenue from essentially the freeway overpass down, include the connector with Buchanan. So those are two areas where we have some lower PCI. And further out on the horizon, there are some potential projects that have utility or transportation elements or drainage considerations that will need to be looked at. So, we have the Solano Complete Streets and potentially improvements out in Brighton and Key Route. So just a short recap, we're seeing a 2-point increase in PCI from the last round of pavement condition assessment, and this increase is across our different functional classes, maybe with the exception of collectors. This current round doesn't include the 2023 slurry seal project, so we're really underrepresenting our PCI score. Based off of the street saver budget projections, a budget of $2.5 million per year is needed to maintain PCI. We're making progress with constructing our project backlog, and in the last 2 years of construction, we're tackling our arterials and residential, and going back including Washington, we're including Collector Street. And then looking ahead, we're going to look at additional paving to fit within those two major planned projects that I mentioned. So if we look at the same paving timeline, but forecasting or looking forward, again, we had our slurry seal project in early 2024, but coming up, anticipated in late 2025, we have Marin Phase 2. And then the following year in 2026, we anticipate the Cleveland Avenue rehab project. These two projects, especially Marin, are pretty substantive. And so, we are not specifically looking at any additional paving like our 2022 paving rehab projects. But what we are looking at is fitting in a type of maintenance treatment, likely in between the Marin Phase 2 project and the Cleveland Avenue project. And the extent of that maintenance treatment will depend on the final costs of when Marin comes in at. And it may span doing additional patch paving, which we did as part of our slurry seal project as well, but it may be a more widespread patch paving project, or maybe an additional seal treatment. And then again, the next round of pavement condition assessment and report is anticipated sometime in late 2025 with a report in 26. So this shows that when the next condition assessment is performed, we will likely be in the middle of the Marin improvement. So that's the end of my prepared slides. I did include a couple more pictures of construction around the city, patch paving on Masonic on the upper left, and going clockwise, we have paving at Marin and Masonic, slurry seal treatment on Key Route, On the bottom right, we have slurry seal treatment at Washington with the intersection at Gateview, our 2022 paving at Jackson, and then more patch paving. I think this one's on Pierce before the slurry seal went in. That'll end my presentation.
Do you have any questions? Sorry.
Early on in the Biden administration, there's a lot of infrastructure money. Did the city benefit from that federal money?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Early in the Biden administration, there's a lot of emphasis on infrastructure money, federal infrastructure money. So did the city benefit from that? Were there more grants? In other words, is the degree of funding we've had for pavement repair going to be consistent for the next, I don't know, 5 or 6 years?
I'll pass that question off to Allison, who's our CIP manager.
Good evening, council members. Can you hear me? So what you see here tonight with the pavement program is funded entirely by pass-through funding and local funding measures. This is not part of any kind of grant. We try to stabilize our paving program funding so we're not reliant on grant funding because it makes it really hard to kind of have inconsistent investments back into our paving year to year. That being said, my understanding is that we do not have a current project that's using the Biden infrastructure. The grant funding we received for some of our transportation projects predated that. It may be supporting some of the ones we're going after. I'm not actually entirely sure. Caltrans is also heavily involved in the access to it, and I understand, I've heard, I have not checked. I don't want to, it's hard not to make a rumor, but it's, California has been slower than other states at getting that infrastructure funding money from kind of the state into kind of local hands. I hope that answers the question.
Any questions? Is there any, as we move on to public comment, is there anyone in the room or anyone online who'd like to make a comment on this item?
If anyone online would like to address the commission, please use the raise your hand function or *9 on your phone. Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Discussion? Do you have any particular to say about this?
I just want to say thank you. A lot of really good information in here. It's kind of nice to see that PCI with the new method is using a larger sample size, so we're less likely to miss things. It just seems like better data. So that's definitely a plus. And it's nice to see the PCI moving in a positive direction. It's really easy to go the other way. So certainly in terms of funding, just to kind of comment on the sources, the state gas tax, the pass-through from the Alameda County transportation sales tax are going to be the most consistent, most reliable sources we've got. Certainly what I've seen of federal grants tends not to lend itself well to either paving projects or paving projects of our size. It's interchange projects, bigger projects that are likely to see significant funding from that. The rest of it is going to come to us in the form of active transportation grants and things like that, which we've been doing, but those aren't pavement oriented. So I'd be surprised, albeit pleasantly, if we got grant funding for paving, but I don't think that that's something we ought to hold our breath for.
I too would like to thank staff for the efforts and getting that PCI raising a little bit. Pardon my questions. This is, it's an extremely tactical matter. I've been on this commission for a while, and I'm still have to be reminded of the details and the hard choices. And I have to say, it's interesting that we're looking a couple of years out on the Cleveland Avenue repaving. And I've been asked about that by folks around town quite often, businesses, and it runs right by the Public Works Department as well, so it's obviously on your mind. This is not a dig at staff. This is if there are council members watching this segment, they should know that seems a little far out because the pavement is in strong need of improvement. If I may, I spent 15 years in information design, graphs, and figures. The presentation has a lot of great information in it. Take a look. You've changed colors somewhat from slide to slide. Some of those are dramatically different and in a different color scheme. Not a problem, but you could follow through some colors a little better, especially on slide 17. You could aid our understanding by putting the line in the colors of pavement that are degraded at the varying levels on the curve. That could help our understanding. I'll leave it at that. I do want to point out that the key route has PCIs of 15, 16, 22, and 19, and appears red in many of your figures. Is that a street that might be picked up along the way, perhaps in portions, with some of the smaller paving projects that you mentioned?
We are looking at different options. That was one of the segments where we have different considerations, potentially some transportation elements that we want to consider before going through with a paving project. We are open to the idea of looking at this, maybe a type of seal treatment that, isn't fully appropriate for a street that is of PCI typically that low, but it may help us to buy a few years of life out of it and improve ride quality in the meantime while those other considerations are being looked at.
I will caveat that by saying that we have some pretty large projects in the immediate horizon. Marin is looking like a 2 to 3 year cost just for the remainder of it. So we are pinched. It's very hard when we have such a large project to be able to squeeze things here and there, especially when Key Route's such a corridor. Doing one street at a time just doesn't really get the full benefit or costs. The other thing is we have other project needs, so outside of the paving program, Key Route, for example, has transportation elements, but this watershed management plan may end up triggering some. We anticipate some stormwater in that area as well. Brighton Avenue is another one on the presentation that kind of popped out as an area we haven't done as much work. That one is primed up for a sewer project in coming years, a pretty major one. That's been on our books for a while. And with that actually is coming water work as well. We have a lot of underground utility work that we want to clear out before we put in a new street. And one of the things I think in this presentation that kind of stress is that the whole idea of keep the good streets good and the bads and slowly tackle the bad streets comes with once the street is in bad condition, it stays in that bad condition. The costs to do it don't change much over time, unfortunately or fortunately for us. The specific kind of weathering and failures on Key Route, for example, is primarily kind of an overall it's an old street. It's not failing because of loading. It's not having large holes develop in it. It's just overall looking worn. Tackling it now, we could have some immediate kind of maybe improvements, but it wouldn't last. It's not one that's going to last long considering the type of traffic that it gets as a collector street or large residential. I'm actually, off the top of my head, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's collector.
Collector.
So Brighton isn't on your current timeline. If you had to put it, would it be 27, 28, 29 and beyond?
Yeah, and at that point, we're hopefully getting into Solano. So there's going to be,
That was my next question.
so we're kind of getting pinched with some really large arterial projects. You can see some of the scores there. Our arterials need some work, kind of catch up. And one of the main things that we've been kind of advocating for is that we don't just focus on one type of street. That we kind of bring the city overall up to make sure we're not letting streets or types of facilities fall behind. So right now, we're kind of in the more costly arterial work, which means we're seeing kind of an instantaneous up. It's been hard to manage in terms of kind of annual planning and costs. With kind of those being finished out and often the curb ramps being constructed, it makes future maintenance a little more straightforward. But that's years in the future to get to that point. But it is the goal. The goal is to have compliant ramps that allow us to do kind of more comprehensive maintenance treatments regularly and keep good streets good so we can really tackle those streets that are in worse condition.
Thank you.
One tiny question. On the street decay curve, there was overlay / TMO. What does TMO mean? Just for my head. Overlay / TMO.
I don't actually recall right now. I'll have to look at the.
Me as well.
Yeah,
I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah,
I
I'll
was
have to
there a
look
lot.
at, there's too many acronyms, but I'll take a look. But generally, it's more involved.
I think, actually, you know what? I do know what it is. It's a thick maintenance overlay. So this is.
Scrape off the top and put a new surface on, or?
It can be that. It can also mean leaving the existing surface, and then you do multiple lifts of slurry material, and you build it up.
Okay.
It's slurry, aggregate, slurry, aggregate, slurry, aggregate. So it overlays, but it's really a maintenance treatment versus a reconstruction.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can have just the build-up, or you can do a grind and overlay where the end result is at the same elevation, if you will, as what you started with, but you've replaced the top layer rather than just patching over the top of it. And then when you go to the reconstruct, you can get to full depth reclamation where you take up the material and you reuse a lot of what's there, which is just about being efficient and not using a whole bunch of new material. You get to reuse and recycle what's there. I did appreciate the comment that we could put seals on failed pavements, which means it's a small layer of nice material that's going to wear out fast because it's still on top of unstable base material. But to the point of, if we spend money fixing the arterials that are in really bad shape, it takes a lot of money to do that. And arterials are the ones that take the greatest loading, so they're going to wear out faster again than when we bring the residential streets up into good repair or the bike facilities, because the bike paths are not going to wear out fast. Bikes are not a heavy load. Those will sustain well. So I appreciate the constant answering of our questions of, this road's in bad shape, why don't you fix it now? And that one, and the idea that it's in bad shape and it's going to stay in more or less the same bad shape for a long time. So we will try to systematically get to those without letting our overall PCI slip. I know it's a tough message to deliver, but I think you've been consistent and pretty clear in delivering that. So thank you again.
I'll just add a comment that my part of town, the northeast part of town, looks great. It's almost completely redone. I send pictures to my friends.
I live right by Brighton, so. But no, I'm kidding. All right, well, thank you guys, or thank you all. Is there anything else? I think if not.
Check to see if there's public comment.
Oh, didn't we do that already?
I thought we checked.
We did.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
I thought we did, yeah.
I have it checked off on my little checklist.
I remember.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to item 5.3.
Give me a moment to get situated here. Okay. Item 5.3 is the active transportation plan, existing facilities. You see before you the existing facilities map. So we prepared this map for the commission tonight. It hasn't been publicly reviewed yet. We're asking you as commissioners to provide feedback on it so we can make updates to it and send it to the consultant for the existing conditions section of the active transportation plan. Barring none, we can just admire it. And but this is that was the intention of this item.
I've definitely been admiring it. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just looking.
Yeah. And I should also say, as we're looking at this, that we are, and we'll give a little bit more about this in the announcements, but we are kicking off the active transportation plan. So we hope to bring more and more substantive materials to you on a month-by-month basis as we go through the plan, and you will have, of course, an opportunity to engage with the plan in the coming months.
I don't understand how, oh, never mind. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong street. Like there was one of those bike boulevards was on Stanage. There's no way to get through there.
Freed had,
So just a question or maybe comment. I noticed that Manor Way is labeled on here, but there's not a line type associated with it, and I don't see a reference to Catherine's Walk. So since those are just pedestrian-only pathways, it might be worth coming up with an indication of those. It's not exclusively bike-centric.
Good.
I guess that's a question.
Good observation.
Is there going to be a separate walking map?
That's a good question. My understanding is that there will be, but it's something that we should clarify in the ATP.
And recognizing that this is labeled as the bike network, so that's fine. But for the ATP, we would presume that would get added. Thanks, Ken.
Right, but it would be reasonable to think that since sidewalks comprise most of the walking network, that you might not prepare an accomplishment slide for that.
No, the pedestrian-only separated from streets type pathways, yes.
I have no objection to including those items on this map myself. I have a couple things. Was it a conscious decision not to indicate a separated bikeway in the 600 block of Key Route in front of the high school? Because I think our initial plans in that area did include that.
It's a good question as well. will note that. This was not prepared by the Community Development Department. We're just taking on feedback right now, and we hope to correct the record if there are any inaccuracies. So I will make that note or answer that question.
I have a comment, but I'll wait till after
Okay.
public comment.
All right. If there are no more questions, we can move on to public comment. Is there anybody in the room or online who'd like to make a comment?
Anyone online would like to address the commission, please use the raise your hand function in the bottom of the Zoom page. Not seeing any hands raised.
Well, just to continue. And again, it's exciting to see these materials come across, and it's amazing to look at the change. When the commission designated a portion of the sidewalk on San Pablo, just the western sidewalk on San Pablo, just south of Marin, here indicated in red, as legal for cyclists to use the sidewalk, we also designated the portion, how can I say that succinctly? So at Dartmouth and San Pablo, the southern sidewalk east of San Pablo to the first driveway is also designated as legal for bicyclists so that they can access the button at the hawk signal. You could argue that that's not an improved facility, but I think it might be important to indicate here to help lead us to what we might improve there. I don't know what you would class it. So maybe that's just a note for the process and staff.
Do you have any idea when we're going to get either a sensor or a bike accessible button for that intersection at Dartmouth and San Pablo?
Can you repeat the question?
Currently, you have to mount the sidewalk like a quarter block up and go along the sushi restaurants and approach. And people often do it at quite a high speed, and in order to hit the button. Otherwise, you will just sit there until the sun expands. I was wondering if there was any thoughts on either getting a sensor for cyclists in the intersection or a button that is reachable without mounting the sidewalk. I don't know what one would do because there's parking there, so you can't put it right on the sidewalk.
That sounds like something that we should discuss under the ATP. Historically, when the crossing was created, and Mr. Bond can correct me on this, we left space to add a cyclist-specific crossing next to the crosswalk between the center islands. It's my understanding that staff has, first of all, unable to get Caltrans to adjust the signage at the site to be more specific about when cars are allowed to proceed as a first step, and secondarily to address the issue of adding cyclist-specific crossing.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
That's right. It's a Caltrans facility, and to be fair, we haven't asked in the last year or two, but when we tried, they did not recognize the hawk signals for for bicycles. It was a pedestrian-only facility. And then as far as the signage goes, I think there's a new sign in the federal MUTCD, and it just hasn't gotten down into the California one yet, but hopefully that will get better.
discussion of the glorious map?
Glorious map, huzzah!
All right. Well, if we're finished providing comments,
I would actually add one additional comment. Sorry.
go ahead.
I will note that the strongest demand lines on this map are San Pablo Avenue, Marin Avenue, and Solano Avenues, I would say. And of those, Marin is the only one that has a cyclist improvement of any kind. And I'll leave it at that.
And that's something we will certainly be visiting in the ATP process.
All right. Are there any announcements?
There are. So as we were just discussing, the active transportation plan has officially kicked off between city staff and the consultants at least. And we're in the process of gathering materials for it and beginning kind of the internal process there. The first opportunity for engagement for your all perspective is it is slated for October of 2024. So, pencil that in. And in that conversation, we'll be discussing vision and goals for the project and existing conditions. So that is the announcement as it pertains to the ATP. The annual sidewalk rehabilitation program, Phase 9, was approved by City Council on July 1st. And just to note, there is a parcel tax for additional sidewalk rehabilitation on the upcoming November ballot. Gig Car Share is shuttering its operation throughout the Bay Area on December 27th of this year. And yes, that's
A very expensive thing for me.
it will change a lot of people's mobility in the city of Albany. And then finally, ending on some good news, is the Jackson Street bike path, at least outside of the UC Village buildings, is finishing by the next Transportation Commission. It will not be fully striped, but you'll be able to walk and ride along it by next month.
Can I add that the sidewalk parcel tax what do we call that, a re-up? It's a reauthorization, broadens the category of items that the funds can be spent on to include off-street bike paths.
Exciting. Do we have any requests for future agenda items from the commissioners?
Well, as long as you ask. We did consider what the rules are for e-bikes. I think the next step would be to consider how we post speed limits on shared and bike-specific paths.
Okay. We are in recess through August. So our next meeting is September 26th. See you all then. Maybe not, Jeff.